For joining us today. Great, and as you may have noticed, we are going to be recording this event so that it can be viewed by others that couldn't attend, or if anybody wants to review it. So please note that. But again, thank you for joining us today for the WTS Philadelphia Breaking Barriers for Women in Aviation event. For those that don't know me, I'm Jen Waters, and I am Vice President at Urban Engineers, and I am also the Director of the WTS Philadelphia Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or EDI Committee. And today's event is a collaboration between the WTS Philadelphia EDI Committee and our Programs Committee, which is run by Kelly Freeman. And just a reminder, if everybody can put themselves on mute when you enter the room, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of this event, so you'll have the opportunity to raise your hand and ask a question at that point. You can also ask questions throughout the duration of the event via chat. Feel free to type in your questions, at any time, and we'll get those answered towards the end of the event. But on behalf of WTS Philadelphia, we just want to thank everybody for your continued support of our organization. We're very excited for next year, which is our 45th anniversary. So a lot of great events coming up in 2024. So please keep your eye out for those. So I have the great pleasure of introducing our program and our panel today. We're going to kick things off today with a presentation by Kelly Yost. She's going to present on the 2022 Women in Aviation Advisory Board report, which is a report that was prepared for the FAA, or the Federal Aviation Administration, to help encourage females to pursue careers in aviation. So once Kelly's done with that presentation, we're going to roll right into a panel discussion where our panel is going to discuss their remarkable careers and all of the efforts they've made to inspire underrepresented individuals to embrace aviation as a career. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel. In no particular order, but we have Dana Donati, who is the CEO of Breaking Down Barriers, which is a nonprofit organization focused on bringing aviation awareness, mentorship, and scholarships to underrepresented young adults. And Dana is a member of the FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board. And then we have Kelly Yost, who I mentioned will be doing our presentation. Kelly is the airport planning, design, and construction leader and a civil engineer at C&S Companies. And Kelly is also a member of the Women in Aviation Advisory Board. And then we have Melinda Montgomery on our panel, and Melinda is the airport manager at the Trenton Mercer Airport in New Jersey. And our last panelist is Ebony Wimbush, who is the president and CEO of the Airport Minority Advisory Council. And this is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting full participation of MWDBE firms in contracting opportunities. And this organization also provides professional development throughout the aviation and aerospace industries. And last but not least, I am excited to introduce our moderator, who is our WTS Philadelphia Fearless Leader and President, Api Appalingam. And Api is also the Deputy Director of Aviation Capital Development at the Philadelphia International Airport and the Northeast Philadelphia Airport. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Kelly to do the presentation.
Oh. All right. Can you hear me and can you see the presentation?
Yes, looks good.
Great. All right. Thanks for those introductions, Jen. Thanks to WTS for hosting this event, and thanks to Api for really pulling us all together for this. So I'm going to talk about the FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board. Back in 2018, the FAA reauthorization did have wording in that reauthorization to develop this Women in Aviation Advisory Board. And as you mentioned, it's to encourage women and girls to enter careers in aviation. So it was written right into the reauthorization. We're hoping that they'll write it in again in the new one in 2023. This is just a little bit of background and the timeline of this board. The nominations were due in October of 2019. The members were announced then in May of 2020. So right as we were hitting COVID, there were nearly 200 applications. 30 people were appointed to the board, and we had broken ourselves into subcommittees. So we had public meetings during that time. You can see the dates there in the timeline. from August 2020 to March of 2022. So again, right during COVID, we were not able to meet in person really very often. Towards the end, we were able to get some small groups together and finally meet up. But at the beginning, it was all virtual. Everything was done via Zoom, and all of our public meetings were posted on FA social media. So we had ongoing research and writing happening the entire 2 years, and then our final report was submitted in March of 2022. So now it's been over a year since that report was submitted, and that's why we're hoping to bring this back to people's attention and get people to look at that report and understand what's out there available. This is just a snapshot of several of the organizations that were represented on the board. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see it was all different groups, from companies like mine, CNS, to educational organizations, to airlines, to nonprofits. It was a really widespread group of women and a bunch of amazing women. And you can see it was very well distributed across the industry. So as I said, we had subcommittees. We were broken into 4 different groups. We had understanding the problem and trends, training and recruitment, mentoring and professional development, and then success stories. I personally was part of the mentoring and professional development group, and we each broke up into these groups and met separately, and then came together in the end, did a bunch of research. Those are some of the list of some of the things that we looked at and the research that we went through to really understand the problem and understand the data. And I'm going to go through some of that in a minute here. But I just want it to be known that there was a lot of work that went into this report and a lot of research. And it's really interesting to look at the numbers and understand where we're at, where we've been, and maybe where we can go in the future. So here's a little bit of the data from the report. And you can see that the percentage of women in the aviation workforce is mostly less than 20% in aviation. Obviously, flight attendants are outside of that group, but some of these numbers are very low. For instance, maintenance technicians at 2.6%. These numbers are just, they're very low, and they haven't changed much over the years. A bit more data here in terms of sexual harassment. This one really got me. I just have to say, when I saw these numbers, I was a little bit shocked and disappointed. When you look at 71% of women in aviation experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace, and not only that, 81% witnessed sexual harassment in the workplace. And there is going to be a question around this particular stat, so we will get into that a little bit more. And then also understanding that over half of women surveyed have considered leaving the aviation industry for one reason or another. The top 3 reasons are listed there, and I'm sure some of the people on the panel can identify with some of these things. Again, this just shows basically the flat line.
This is January,
this is data from 2005 to 2020, so it doesn't go beyond that, but you can see it's just a flat line. When you look at the numbers and you see that we have made some progress over the years, but I feel like we can do much better. And you can see at the top here, the different colors represent different parts of the industry, from air traffic control, flight instructors, mechanics, some different groups within the industry. So this is our barriers timeline. This is in the report, and this is a very important piece of the report. It basically shows the compounding barriers over years. And if you look at the side, you can see, you start with so many people born into being a woman in the world, and the things that happen to you over your career. And you can see the fading faces as you go to the top and you get to the executive, and there's only one there. So these are some of the reasons why that happens. It can be just not seeing women in leadership. It could be harassment. It could be lack of mentorship or lack of professional development opportunities. But it's never the one single thing that's going to happen to you. It's the compounding of all of those things that happen over a career, where a woman might just say, you know what, I'm done. I've dealt with enough. I just can't do it anymore. And That's what we don't want to happen. We want to change that and make it the positive side of this barrier timeline, which is the accelerated success. And on this timeline, you can see as you go to the top, it gets more and more people and more women in the executive roles. So the way that we can help this is part of what the report is about. And you look at some of our recommendations, and those are included here on this timeline. And some of those things we're going to talk more about, just to mention, looking at outreach programs, having mentors, having professional development, and just having those role models available for people to be able to see and understand what opportunities are out there. This is just a fun slide to show some of the things that we did with the Women in Aviation Advisory Board. We did do a Washington, D.C. visit. We've done a few. There's some pictures from that event. We did some Capitol Hill visits. We were trying to get that wording into the FAA reauthorization for 2023. And the wording is in there. Haven't seen the final version yet, but I'm hoping it'll stay and that we will have a continuing committee to continue this work. The final report has 5 different areas of focus. So those are culture, recruitment, retainage, advancement, and data. All of these pieces are important. All of these pieces need to be thought about, and there are recommendations surrounding each of these. There are 55 recommendations in the report, and those are directed at different people. They're directed some to industry, some directly to the FAA, some to the DOT, and some directly to Congress. This is just a slide to show, just in case we need to be reminded, why is this important? It's so important to have diversity of thought, to have different minds in the room, to come up with different ideas, have innovation. Role models to me is a big deal. I always tend to look for the female in the room. If I happen to be only one of 2, there's one other one, I just tend to look for that person. And workforce shortages is an easy one. Obviously, we've been dealing with that in the aviation industry, and we need to get more people involved in the industry. So finally, just a few ideas, things that you can do, people that are on this call. If you feel like you want to help, you want to do something, here's a list of some things you can do. I'd say number 1, please read the report, understand what's in there. Talk to the FAA if you have people that you know in the FAA. Let them know how important this is, and we'd like some action to be taken on some of these items. You can do outreach, you can be an ally, be a mentor. Just talk to somebody that's different than you. Talk to somebody that has a different background, a different story, understand where they're coming from, and just be an advocate for someone. So Api, that is the end of the presentation. I will stop sharing if you want to do Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelly. If I can have all of our panels onto the virtual stage. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well, and I'm really honored to have all of our distinguished speakers here joining us for today's discussion. And Kelly, thank you for, I know that was like years of work that you just showed in 10 minutes and like 14 slides. I know that report itself is like almost 100-page. I don't know the exact number, but I do encourage everybody to read that report if you haven't. So we're going to get started with the panel discussion with the panelists. And before we do that, just a reminder for everybody to stay on mute, but just keep your camera on. We'd love to see your faces, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions during Q&A. But first, I want to ask a question to everybody in the room that's attending today. Have you heard of this report before today? So if you can go to the chat box and type in yes or no, we would like to know how many of you today, and I think there's about 112 people on, say yes or no, and then we'll come back to that in just a little bit. All right, so the first question we're going to start with is something we don't often talk about, but we're going to talk about it here, and it's going to be the first question. So as Kelly said, in a 2018 survey of Women in Aviation International members, 71% reported experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace or another professional aviation setting, and 81% reported having witnessed sexual harassment. I was surprised by this number, but not surprised to see that number, but also not surprised in the experiences I know I've had, and as well as other peers in the industry have had. It's often underreported, with concerns over retaliation and/or inaction. Sexual harassment can be difficult to speak up against. However, this is a cycle that must be broken, and the more people to speak up against incidents, the less commonplace it will become. So can each of you on this panel today speak about your experiences and advice to both women and men? So I would like to start with Ebony.
Thank you, Api, and really thank you for the opportunity to participate in this really important conversation. I'd be remiss without thanking that committee. The work that they've done is admirable. I know how hard it is to stay the course, but really they've put together a fine report that outlines exactly what we need to do. And obviously, thank you for the WTS Philadelphia leadership, including yourself. Let me just say this, Api, representation matters, right? Across the globe, women who are working in male-dominated industries are definitely more likely to experience sexual harassment than those who are in other industries. And there are reports out there that outline that. For me personally, as a young manager early in my career in a Fortune 100 company, I was working in an energy division in a very male-dominated
That explains the lack
sector,
of MBE.
in a very male-dominated sector of the industry. And as a young manager working in this industry, often many of the people who reported work to me were majority older men and white males. And so the scenario was this: we were at an industry conference, not unlike industry conferences that I participate in today, and very many of us participate in. We are entertaining clients. We're walking back to our rooms that happen to be on the same hallway. And in approaching the elevator, one of my employees, a gentleman who was much older than me, made a very, very suggestive comment. At the time, I had not experienced this situation, and it really took me off guard, but I deflected it, and I actually found a way to get out of that situation. And not knowing what else to do, I knew that I couldn't take this elevator and take this hallway back to our rooms because we had been out. He'd had a glass or so of wine, and I thought the situation could even go further and be worse. So what did I do? I pretended like I forgot something down in the restaurant that we were in. And I knew I just, I needed to get out of that situation. The next day, it was so uncomfortable, right? That I called one of my VPs, not knowing what it was, but just described the situation and wanted to get some feedback to say, was I overthinking this? Was this something that was not a big deal? And fortunately, she was more experienced. She had been, further in her career. She immediately recognized what it was, right? She immediately recognized that it was sexual harassment. She took the lead to get HR involved. HR took the appropriate measures to put that person on formal notice. But more importantly, it was a teachable moment, and not only did training for that person, but realized that training for our entire group needed to happen. And so my advice is this, right? Hiring women in positions, promoting them into leadership positions is certainly not the only thing that should be done, but it is an important step to change the culture. The representation of having a VP, a female VP in that position, was important. She took this situation very seriously. And so what I tell all of the leaders out there, to take situations like that very seriously, get the appropriate people involved to test the case. And in this moment, it was HR, and do training, right? Don't wait until it happens, right? Even though in this situation, the training started as this situation happened, but encourage training in areas of sexual harassment, identifying it, taking measures, actually to show examples of what it could look like for the entire team. And so again, representation, training, women in positions to help change the culture would be my advice to anyone out there. Thank you, Coffee.
Thank you, Ebony. Thank you for sharing your story. I think a lot of folks relate to that. The story you shared, I know bits and pieces of it. I can relate to it as well. And I agree with you about pretending like nothing happened. I think that's also something that a lot of us can relate to, but we need to speak up. So thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable.
You're
Melinda,
welcome.
how about you?
All right, so yeah, Ebony, thanks for sharing that. I just want to say hello to a lot of friends and colleagues that are on here. Congratulations. Thank you for joining this important conversation. And it's nice to see you on here. Also, congratulations to WTS Philadelphia for your upcoming 45th year. So for me personally, I really don't feel I can share an experience, but as you said, 71% of us have had one. My resume is just not that deep that I don't want everyone trying to figure out where or what had happened. But you know, it happens. And I think for me, I would rather choose to speak about what we can do when we're talking about sexual harassment, and not just you know, we're not talking about gender discrimination. We're talking clearly about sexual harassment. So I'd like to share what I believe can make one resilient when you're faced with that. And I think what makes you resilient, I think our young ladies and even our young men need to have achievements that make them confident in their ability, so that they know their self-worth, right? Because oftentimes we're young and we're thinking, oh, well, I don't have any say in this, this environment of what's going on. So I think you should know your self-worth. I think early on you should find a tribe within your organization. I think it's very important to find a group of people that are relatable to you and will have your back. I think it's important that you find a strong mentor within your organization. Ebony had alluded to the fact that, not just alluded, but indicated she spoke to somebody higher up that had power and had an ear. I think everyone should understand going in what their workplace sexual harassment policy is and ask how it is supported. And I think also very early on, every young person should know that if they feel that they are in a position that they are uncomfortable with, that they're entitled to say, I'm uncomfortable. And they're able to ask for a meeting space that's not in private, and that they're able to ask for someone else to be in the room with them.
Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. I think, you know, showing young women in the workplace that it's important to speak up is, I think, critical, right? I've been in a situation where I made sure that the young woman who didn't want to initially speak up because she was fearful of retaliation, say that I've got her back. And whatever, I know this company, this organization will have your back as well. And don't be afraid to speak up. And she was able to speak up, and I'm really proud that she was. But it took somebody, a senior to her, right, to say it's okay. I would do the same thing, right? And so thank you for sharing the importance of mentorship and having somebody there that will guide that individual. Dana, how about you?
Thank you. So I really didn't have one specific experience that I wanted to discuss, but I think, you know, being a pilot, especially in the early 2000s, I didn't have a lot of female leaders that I could go to, usually female peers. And I was either the only female in a lot of my training classes or one of two females. So we tend to, you know, stick together and talk to each other about comments or things that were happening. I either called people out on it or used humor or sarcasm to deflect. But one thing that, you know, I've noticed as, you know, we progress is that technology our flight instructors or my students in my previous flight schools, sexual harassment usually came to me through a female student or a female flight instructor through social media. And that's one of the things that I want to highlight is that, even though somebody might not say something face to face, that sexual harassment can still exist over social media. So that's something that we've taught our students and flight instructors, our young students and flight instructors about, is that, if it's happening in the workspace, maybe with a student and a flight instructor, but coming through social media to report it. I didn't have anybody to report to 20 years ago, didn't really have social media either. But it's something that we don't want to ignore. I kind of came from the environment of like, keep your head down, make sure you're done with training, just focus on yourself and don't worry about anything else. But through initial training, through discussions with our female students and our female flight instructors, and not to just say that it happens to females, I want to emphasize that, is that to bring it up there, I think it's people are discussing it more, and it's something that we shouldn't hide in the workplace.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that. I forgotten that social media now has, I get reminded, I should say, that social media now has an influence and an impact on each of us, and the comments that are made on there also has an impact. So thank you for bringing that up. Kelly, how about you?
I would echo a lot of the things that I've heard, not hiding it, talking about it, men speaking up about it. Think about how you want your wife, your mom, your daughter to be treated, and think about that when you're in the workplace and you see something going on. That statistic that 81% have seen it happen, that means people need to speak up. So that's the main thing I want to focus on, is saying something. Men and women, if you see it, if it's happening to you. I had a situation where prior to CNS, I was on a construction job, and it was more, for me, it was a day-to-day thing. It was making me feel uncomfortable kind of every day, and I never said anything. And my 46-year-old self is much different than my 26-year-old self. When I think back on it, I think, what was I thinking? Why didn't I say something? Why didn't I tell him to stop? The worst thing that happened that I didn't like was he would come up behind me and tickle my sides. So he's touching me, and it's happening multiple times. I don't know why. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't want to make waves. I didn't want to, have to talk about it. This is a guy that had been working in the company for over 30 years. You don't want to bring it up because you don't want to cause problems. You just want to kind of blend in. You might be the only female out there. You don't want to cause those issues, but I am here to say this shouldn't be happening, and we do need to say something. And going back to what Avi said, if you don't feel comfortable saying something to that person or to your HR rep, find an ally, find a mentor, somebody that you do feel comfortable talking to. I'll leave it at that, but I'm really glad we're talking about this because I've never told anybody about this except my husband. So it's nice to get it out there.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of the folks on this call, men and women, can have a story of their own, many stories of their own they could share. So what we wanted to get out of this question is we need to talk about this. It's not something that is hidden. There should not, it's easier said than done, I understand. And the more experience you have in the industry or in the workforce, the more confident you become. But I think, as Ebony said earlier, representation is important. Getting women in senior leadership positions is important. Having those women leading by speaking up is important. So I think it's important for everybody in an organization to speak up. So thank you all for being vulnerable and sharing your stories. I want to go to the chat box because it was interesting to see all the no's. Did you guys see that? When I asked how many of the folks have read this report or heard of this report, it was a lot of no's. So Kelly and Data, I think we got about 100 and how many people are here today? 115 or so, 126. I think we got 126 people now. They could say they have heard of this report. And I hope all of you, Kelly Freeman did share a link to this report. Please click on that link and take a look at it. You should definitely read it. If not, skim through it and see what is there. And there's lots of great information for you to look at and also share with your organization as well. So please share it with your organization. All right. The next question I do want to ask the audience before I get to the panelist is, there's a lot of folks on this call from all different forms of aviation as well as outside of aviation. Can you let us know what type of organization, or if you want to be specific, where you're from? So you can say airport, airline, government agency, nonprofit, student, retired, not aviation, Eagles fan, something like that. So while you do that, I'm going to go to the second question. So starting at a very young age, girls encounter barriers to entering the industry, and these barriers are compounded over time, as that graphic that Kelly showed us, right? The triangle that gets smaller. For example, it starts with the lack of role models in toys and cartoons, then lack of mentoring by parents or teacher, then lack of female role models, then earning disparities, then lack of flexible and inclusive work-life policies, then lack of promotion opportunities, and then lack of leadership opportunities. There's so much more even in between that. So what barriers did you encounter, and how did you build your confidence and achieve the level of success that you have in the aviation industry? And for this question, I want to start with Dana.
Thank you, Abby. I think it all started off, growing up in the military. I was very much influenced by military operations, but did not know anything about aviation or the airlines per se. It was a military hop to Germany that I got to meet the crew coming out of Pittsburgh International Airport. And I said, this is what I want to do. How do I get into aviation? And they all told me that they went to the Community College of Beaver County. So that's the college that I selected. But as I started to prepare for that journey in aviation, I didn't have the funding. I didn't know what was next. Like once I signed up for classes, how do I get my flight time? What happens when I graduate? All of these unknowns. So I had to figure a lot of those things out by myself, because I don't have anybody, in my family that was in aviation, and my parents really only was able to support me by saying, go to the CCVC. Once I met my peers at CCVC and started to figure out the journey into aviation, it was very helpful to learn from people that came from airline families. A lot of people in the Pittsburgh area are from, US Airways families. And so I learned through them. But then once I got into the industry, I think, as a female, going through maternity leave, nursing, how do I take time off? How do I get uniforms? All of that stuff was an unknown. In fact, when I called my HR rep, and I was at the airline, I was flying with for several years, and my husband also flew with that airline too. So we shared FMLA, unfortunately. So only one of us could take the time off. So we had to figure out how we're going to work that. And then when I talked about uniforms, they sent me a flight attendant dress, and I flew an airplane. So that was not going to be a pretty sight, trying to climb into the cockpit in a dress, pregnant. So I ended up making my own uniform. I purchased a maternity shirt. I cut off the sleeves and made the cuffs epaulets holders. So it was things like that I kind of had to figure out on my own. Now we have nursing pods in airports. So thank you. Like there's some really great progress that's happening. Yeah, but a lot of it was just trying to figure it out. Talking to other females. A lot of people tend to leave once they have, families. They leave the flight deck and they come back sometimes. But a lot of the decisions that I made in my career tend to revolve around my kids. So what was the most important for me at that time was leaving the flight deck, because my husband also flies, and kind of navigating my career outside of the flight deck while still being in aviation. Both men and women have been supportive. I have really great mentors and people that I can lean on and ask questions to. And I think that that's really important as you're trying to figure out these barriers. Who's done it before you, or what have other people done that maybe are parallel to what you're going through?
Yep. When you shared your story about sharing the FMLA with your husband, something I talk about very often, because I never saw this, is my husband is a stay-at-home dad. I never saw that in my career with other women. The few women that were in leadership positions, I never saw that. And so for me, it's something that I want to keep talking about, because even now when I talk about it, I can see the faces from it varies. It varies from like surprise to happiness to shock, confusion, maybe sometimes. But my husband decided to stay at home when we had our children because it just made sense financially for us. But what I often saw, to your point, was women do step back because it's a family decision, and it's not what works for somebody works for you. It has to be your family decision. But what I often saw was women were stepping back from the role during that period, not men stepping back. So the fact that I have a husband that does that, I'm very proud of him. So I like to talk about him, even though he hates it. So Ebony, how about you?
I'd first like to say, if you're a Steelers fan, you too can put that in the chat. Like Dana, I hail from the great city of Pittsburgh, and there's something in the water there, not just with sports, but aviation. But in all seriousness, I would say, the question is a great question around barriers that we've encountered, but more importantly, what we've done to achieve the success in terms of where we are today. And really continuing to achieve success, but building confidence. As a young Black woman starting out in a career of aviation, I like to say that I've experienced the trifecta of biases, and not just starting out, but throughout my career, being a woman, being young in my career. I actually graduated out of high school at 16, and so just everything went quicker, right? And then being a Black woman, there have been so many experiences, but one thing is for certain that helps build your confidence. And it's, I like to use that same term that Melinda used, you find your tribe, right? You find your team. Early on, I found organizations that supported my success, even before I knew exactly how I was going to pursue a career and what I was going to do. OBAP was one of the organizations that was on the report. Early on, I found OBAP because too, like Dana, people who lived in Pittsburgh, my mom worked for US Airways, right? And so she was a flight attendant. She wanted me to be exposed to what she just knew as a career that could open up doors to see the world. And it led me to Embry-Riddle through scholarships and exposures that OBAP gave to me. But I'd say this, one of the things that you can do, another thing that you can do to continue to build your confidence in any career, right? In particular in aviation, when given the opportunity, sometimes we're given these opportunities, we've earned, I should say, these opportunities. What you have to do is continue to make sure that you are extremely knowledgeable, that you walk in the door being probably over prepared, knowing more than probably everybody in the room, but doing that throughout my career has helped me build confidence. Surrounding myself with people who could give me perspective on things, and not just formal mentors, but people who saw me in different ways. Sometimes it was colleagues, right? Asking the questions about how they see me coming through in a particular situation, and me course correcting, right? Also, just being persistent. I think one of the things that women tend to do, right? We work hard, we brush up on all of the information, but sometimes we don't raise our hands and ask for projects and ask for exposure when others tend to do that often. And so one of the things that's helped me to gain confidence is just having experience, right? And raising my hand and asking for projects, even when I was afraid to do so. I'd say the last thing that is really important as women look at how they can continue to achieve levels of success. And when I look back, I think this is one of the most important things. It's the organization that you choose to work for. So I've been really, really fortunate, not knowing at the time, to choose organizations that had cultures that supported diversity, right? Even though they weren't perfect. And I explained that situation. I've worked for FedEx, for Johnson Controls, for Siemens, for the city of Baltimore, and now for AMAC. And each of those organizations early on were trying to ensure a culture that was inclusive. Today, we have choices, right? We have choices. We have to understand our value. We have to recognize that value. And as we do our due diligence to choose not just jobs, but employers, we have to really evaluate, am I setting myself up for success? Because this is a culture that supports inclusion, that supports diversity. And so I think that is an extremely important lesson. I didn't know it then, but I'd share it now. Thank you.
Well said, Ebony, well said. It's things that I wish I heard 20 years ago, right? Or it was taught in school 20 years ago. What I was looking for was who was going to pay me the most, not culture, right? Which a lot, I think, young people do even now, is they look at who's paying the most and not necessarily culture. But maybe there's a way for us as representative of different aviation industries to spotlight the culture, because we're brand ambassadors of those organizations, right? And so by showing up, I think we're showing a little bit of our culture. Kelly, how about you? What barriers did you face, and how did you get to be the boss that you are at CNS?
For me, I want to talk about flexible and inclusive policies. It was not that we had a lack of those policies. It was that I did not have an awareness of those policies. And it took me, I went through having 2 kids, working a full-time job. My husband works a full-time job, burning myself out, not sleeping, trying to do the mom thing and the work thing. And again, not telling anybody about it. I obviously have a problem here, not speaking up. At least I used to. That's what changed is, I burned myself out. I got to the point where I was going to be ready to quit. Found an ally. And I talked to this person and told them what was going on and told them I was ready to quit. And it's like, oh, well, wait, we have, you can work flexibly. You can work part-time. There's things we can do. And it was just, somebody just needed to make me aware of that, because I didn't see anybody else doing that around me. I just needed that person to tell me what was available to me, and it changed everything. I worked for part-time for a few years. I got through that stage of life when my kids were younger, and I'm back to working full-time. But if I hadn't talked to that person, hadn't found that ally, and then went on to find another mentor that kind of talked me through, she also worked part-time, how that looks and how that works and how you make it work with your life. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for those conversations. And on the confidence piece, the best advice I've seen is confidence is making actions. It's doing things that are outside your comfort zone, not being afraid to make mistakes, and just going out there and doing things and raising your hand. And I might get this statistic wrong. Dana, do you remember when we talked about in the board about how if you're going after a job, men want to make sure they have 60% of the qualifications. And this is a generalization, obviously, but women generally want to have 100% of the qualifications. They're looking at a job description and they're like, well, I don't have that one thing out of 20, so I can't go after that job. We just have to change that mindset and just be confident in ourselves and go after things that are scary. And the last thing I want to say is you could also do something physically that's scary. I like to lift heavy weights. This is something that has started in my adult life in my 40s, and it has absolutely built my confidence. It's something outside of work, and it's just something that has definitely helped me.
Very cool. Now I'm going to have to see that in action when we meet in person, is how much you could lift if you're doing heavy lift. Not that I do it, but just want to see this. So thank you for sharing that, Kelly. Melinda, how about you?
So, the question is, what barriers have we encountered, right? And the report lists at least 7 that, you mentioned. And, it's funny. It's like, I don't know. I've just never really seen myself as being behind the curve. And I really think it's personality. I really think it's being a 70s child, where you just had to do it. You just had to do it on your own. We had no helicopter parents. We had good role models. I don't know where they went. We had Mary Tyler Moore. We had the Bionic Woman. We had, like Charlie's Angels. Where did they go? I have no idea where they went. But with that being said, I mean, I didn't have anybody in my family that was in aviation. No one, nobody was. In fact, my whole family was, doing something completely different. But I was just a very headstrong person and kind of charged through it. But especially now I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I realize I'm like, oh, like she's not a carbon copy of me. And like and then you realize like, oh, well, other girls might not feel the same way and have the same abilities and character and confidence that I just kind of railed on through. So it's extremely important to expose young girls to aviation. I think it's extremely important, considering the gaps that we're going to have in aviation, to expose everyone to aviation. I mean, I'm looking at some of the statistics in careers like airport management, mechanics, air traffic controllers, and pilots. I mean, there's just some ethnicity minorities that are worse off than women minorities. So I think the conversation right now is focusing on women. I'm not going to detract from that, but I think it's very important to expose young ladies very early on, and make them aware of it. And how did I build my confidence? Well, I think I just came with it, but how do you really build confidence, right? For me, you earn it. You earn it. You earn it through training. You earn it through hard work. You earn it through achievement. And when I say you working hard, and I'm not trying to just, compete with. I don't think you work harder than the men. I think when you want something, you work harder than everyone. You work harder than everyone. And then with hard work comes achievement, which builds confidence, and things like your education, things like industry achievements that you can get in. For me, it's like AAA, right? Things like AAA, they allow you to obtain tangible evidence of your abilities. That right there gives you the confidence to compete. And I think knowing my abilities and my brought confidence for me to pursue higher positions.
Great advice about confidence, and to your point about you didn't have anybody. I didn't have anybody in AV. I think a lot of people don't, right? I think I hear this, and I don't know if it's other industries, if there's anybody in other industries here, chime in, but I hear often when I hear speakers on panels is like, aviation just like fell in my lap. It wasn't like a trajectory. Dana might have a different story, maybe, because she wanted to be a pilot, but I also did not have an education in aviation, just engineering, and aviation was something I discovered when I was 21 years old, or 22 years old, and determining where I wanted to work at. So this has been one of the things WTS has been trying to do, which is showcase the different modes of transportation and what representation in that means. So there are engineers in airports, there are lawyers in airports, right? There's firefighters, policemen, everything. And it's fun to see the faces of the young folks that we talk to when that light bulb goes off, and it's like, oh, cool, like that is available in aviation. So hopefully we're getting more young folks in aviation through WTS. Going back to the chat here, it's really great, besides the football rivalry, which I won't get into, it's great to see the diversity in representation here. So many airports, consulting, I think I saw FAA, great to see FAA on here, but great representation, just the spectrum of folks that work in the aviation industry. So thank you all for joining us today. My next question to all of you, again on the panel, not the panel, but the people attending today, is I want to know how long you've been in the aviation industry. So for the folks that are in the aviation industry, can you type in the number for the number of years you've been in the aviation industry? If you're not in the aviation industry, you can type in a number and let us know you haven't been in the aviation industry. And this is a little bit to do with the next question, which I'm going to direct to the panel. It's about retention. So retention is critical to ensure that women remain in the talent pipeline and are set up for long-term career success. To retain women in aviation, organizations must create environments in which women are seen, heard, and valued. This cannot be achieved unless work-life balance is addressed. I love this topic. I haven't figured it out. I'm still looking for an answer. I know everybody has a different answer. To the panel, though, my question to you, it's a two-part question, is how do you balance your work and your personal life? And how would you ask for help? Because all of us have been there, but maybe we didn't ask for it and we didn't know how to. But how would you ask for help if you had issues developing a healthy work-life balance? And for this one, I'm going to start with Kelly.
This is a tough one. I've heard this question so many times over the years. I think the best answer I have is just no, you can't do it alone. You can't do things alone. You can't hold things in. You have to ask for help. And I know sometimes that's tough, but you do have to lean on others, whether it's a spouse or a family member or a friend or somebody at work. Asking for help can be a game changer. And just one little example of that, anybody that has kids that are in school, there are so many school emails keeping track of Spirit Week and when you got to bring the teacher a present and what homework is due, and just so many emails. So my husband always got the emails, but there was a point in time where he started paying attention to the emails and started saying, hey, we need to do this, So having that support and so you don't have that, people have heard mental load. There's a term, mental load, that you're thinking about all of these things that you have to do, not just at work, your to-do list at work and your to-do list at home, thinking about what your kids need to have for school in the morning and making lunches and cleaning the house. And it becomes too much. And sharing that load and asking for help is just the best advice I can give. And if you can afford to have somebody to clean your house for you, have someone come in and clean the house, whether it's once a month, twice a month. If you can't do that, then maybe trade with somebody, trade babysitting nights with a friend, something like that. Just find a way to find that support group or the tribe, as was mentioned by Ebony and Melinda. So I think that's the best way I have to help with that. And then I would also say to take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself, and you have to find things that recharge you, whether it's, for me, running and lifting weights is something I like to do. When I run, I'm able to just let my mind wander. It's when I come up with some of my best ideas. I don't have anybody bothering me, and I can just let my mind run free. And so you have to find those things that recharge you and help you out. And I forgot to mention, I'm from Detroit. So the Lions, who thought that the Lions would be where they're at right now? I had to just put that out there.
Thank you for putting that out there. But I learned a new term, mental load. I haven't heard that before. Now I need to look it up. But you're correct. There's so much going on today that how do we balance that all? I like that. I like your advice. I do need somebody to clean my house too. So I'm gonna take you up on that maybe. I want to direct it next to Dana.
Thank you. So this one's a hard one for me, to be quite honest. I don't have it figured out.
Yep.
I don't even pretend to have it figured out. I'm afraid to even turn my screen because we just moved to Dallas just 2 weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving. There's still boxes everywhere. So this is the cleanest wall I can find. But I think when it comes to work-life balance, I knew that I couldn't sustain being a pilot, an assistant chief pilot, with two kids who were kind of in third and fourth grade. There was an opportunity that came up. It was to take the dean of aviation position at the Community College of Beaver County. So I knew at that time that was the right time to transition out of the flight deck for my family, to be in higher education, to kind of be on the same school schedule as my kids, that cadence. And it ended up being a great opportunity that changed my career path in a positive way. Asking for help, I'm not good at either. But I think, my husband and I, we have two boys. everybody has a vacuum. We have 4 vacuums in our house. So everybody takes responsibility of a room or a different area. Whoever cooks doesn't clean. So we have to share the duties in the house. And now my oldest one is in 9th grade and my youngest is in 7th grade. And I think they're ready to take on the world by themselves. So I think it's really making sure that my family knows that I can't do everything and I can't do everything for them. And they pitch in and we all, take care of the house together. And when it comes to work, I think when it comes to finding that tribe at work that you can talk to and count on, because not every day you're going to be your best, even though you have to show up and be your best, no matter if your kid's sick at home or whatever's going on in your personal life. But I've had some really great people that I've worked with who can step in and help at work as well. So I think it's that type of help that I ask for, but not necessarily, I don't know, communicating to everybody. I haven't reached that point to reach out to more people for help.
Okay, that's fair enough. But I got another tip from you. So Christmas presents for my boys is vacuums, right? I'm going to be mom of the year because I got them 2 vacuums, I feel like, right?
Yeah, and everybody has a dust glove. Those are awesome too. Just go and touch everything.
So cleanliness. So far, 2 people are talking about cleanliness and how that's affecting their work life. All right, good to know. Melinda, how about you?
Oh, some great ideas. My kids are advanced teenagers right now, but I wish I could have bubble wrapped them in the Swiffer and just had them go around the house. But we're beyond that now. So, all right. So we're talking about retention. We're talking about a work-life balance. And I think a couple of things come to mind. Ebony mentioned before, and then Dana just mentioned choices. Okay. And I want everyone to keep that in mind. Okay. So first off, I think we all believe what we think work-life balance is, right? But let's ask ourselves, when you just say work-life balance, what is it? Is it work-life balance for parents? Is it work-life balance for the younger generation who like to give back to communities, have social change? Is it a work-life balance for hikers and yoga lovers? Is it mental health? Is it fun? Is it parenting? Is it caring for a debilitating illness or a parent? What is work-life balance? Okay, so I think that it could be different things, but I think predominantly we're talking about parenting, right? That's kind of the subject that keeps coming up on an all-woman panel. And so I think we're talking about mostly, and I think, I just think work-life balance is a very broad term. I think we should really narrow the focus sometimes and talk about fair child rearing policies and practices, right? Let's call it what it is. The fact is, as a country, we fall short on that. You saw in the report how every other country has better parental leave policies than we have. And I think this country, it's a big ask, but we'll see what happens. I think the country needs to embrace equal mom and dad parenting care policies, so that there's equality in the policies and that both sexes can appreciate a leave. Okay. They won't say it. I personally think when women leave, it's seen as a vacation, and women see it as developing our future generation. And so when we go back, we're shocked that the operation kept running without us, and why isn't there, why am I not still in the same spot or competitive as I was? And I think if this country really made fair gender parental leave and it was shared 50-50, I think it's a game changer that we just don't have. I think it'd be a different conversation. Okay. So then you ask, well, how do I balance work and personal life? Okay. So it's choices, I mean, we're not helpless. We don't just find ourselves in the position we're in, right? We have choices. And when I started out in airports, I'm young. I was the only female on my team. I'm doing shift work. I'm moving across the country, perhaps moving to another part of the country. my family's not around me. I have no family. And yet all the men around me, you know, would tell me about how their wives were taking care of everything. So I said, oh, well, then this really isn't the current job as an operations shift person, right? I really shouldn't think about having a family when I'm on an operations shift 3,000 miles away from my extended family, because that's just maybe not, you know, going to work out for me. So I made real clear choices about when to have a family, when I was in a better position to have more control of my time, more control of my money. I was, start out, you're broke. Right now I've got, I've got time, I've got money, I've got the ability to manage my own schedule and calendar, which you don't have when you're young. So I decided it was a choice to do it later on in life when you have more opportunity. How would I ask for help if I needed some help having a work-life balance? Well, I think I think this is when you make choices, right? I think you have to decide what is important to you early on, and if that work environment is going to be able to cater to some needs that you might have. When you're in operations and you're working a shift, you can't really work from home, And personally, as an airport manager, I don't feel effective if I work from home. And so I think if you want to make some lifestyle choices, you've got to evaluate whether or not your career and your current employer can accommodate that. And also, I think it's prudent upon you, if you can, to come up with alternatives to present to your supervisor about how you can still maybe modify, but still add value to your organization.
Something you said about FMLA leave that resonated with me, and I spoke about it in a WTS newsletter a few months ago, is I also had children later in my career, but I still didn't have 12 weeks of paid maternity leave. I used my vacation, which I think all of the women on this call can agree. Having a baby, especially if you had a C-section, is not a vacation, right? I used vacation, I used short-term disability, I used my FMLA, and I pretty much put it together to come up with 12 weeks. I wish I didn't have to do that, right? I wish we were at a place where women aren't, in addition to planning a master plan or something like that, planning our FMLA, and how are we going to get that time, right, to take 12 weeks off, which again isn't enough, but at least somewhere to start. And one thing I do here at PHL is when somebody in my team is going through that phase of life, I encourage time off. I often see the men in organizations still to this day not taking the necessary time off. And I know I don't have the right to say what people should be taking off, but I try to, as a leader in an organization, encourage time off and encourage long periods of time, especially when I know the organization provides it. Because what I was seeing was also in an organization where if there was several weeks, the men would still not take several weeks. They would take, a few days off. But that representation I felt like when I was younger wasn't fair, because I was like, how am I going to have a baby and then come back to work in 2 days? How is that possible? Because I didn't see the women in the organization that were taking longer periods of time. So just my 2 cents on this is, I think it's important that if your organization has the policies, that you take advantage of those policies and champion for more if that's what you feel like you could speak up about. A couple of things in the chat that I wanted to chime in on. So Teresa or Sia, she said we need changing tables in both women and men, and just like SLC, I proud to say PHL, we have it in both women and men. That was part of the restroom renovation program. We wanted to make sure it wasn't just in the women's restroom. It should be in both men and women's restroom. And then a lot of people agreed about the cleanliness, or one person in particular, a lot of people liked it, that does take a mental toll. So clutter, physical and mental takes a toll. Clutter takes a toll. So I didn't realize that. Maybe there's an explanation for me on that too. I just never linked it together. And then going back to how many people in this, how long the people have been in this industry, it's great to see lots of experience here. There's also a few newbies. I see somebody that's been in the industry for 2 months, so welcome. And then I see folks that have been in the industry for 30 plus years. So thank you for being in this industry and hopefully being a representation of what we need to get more diversity and inclusion into this industry. Ebony, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I want to double down on a couple things that were said because I think it's really important. I also want to be sensitive to people on the call who aren't mothers, right? So yes, I'm a mother. My son is 26. I don't have issues with balancing what I have to do for him today. It doesn't negate that I still have challenges with work-life balance. But where I really want to go is what employers can do, right? Because we talked about this as a retention matter. And in the economy that we're in the space that we're in time, retention is critical because of labor shortages, right? And finding and retaining talent. And so the aviation industry in a lot of fronts is sometimes slow to adopt policies that are supportive, are proactive. I want to tell you guys that there are industries out there that realize that their employees are burning. They're going hard and they're burning. So instead of having just the policy in place to have vacation and allowing some to roll over, actually the industry that my son works in, which is the finance industry, and my best friend who's in consulting, their employers have taken it a step further. They actually are requiring mandatory vacation. So this year, my son is required to take a mandatory 2-week vacation. He cannot log on. He cannot call in. He cannot, engage the firm in any way. My best friend who works for a consulting company, a very well-known one, they have a collective disconnect. They do it at a time that is close to a holiday where people normally either take off. There's a one-day holiday in there. So what I'd like to express is, as leaders, we are trying to retain women, but we're trying to retain talent, right? So don't just expect that we're going to do the right things, because we all can admit we have challenges, whether we're parents or not, with workplace balance. As leaders of organization, be proactive. How can you move your policies further? This is not something that's new. It's being done in other industries. So look outside of our industry for how employers are retaining. And I challenge you to be the first in our industry, right? Be a model, right? Do a collective disconnect, require mandatory vacation without engaging. So I wanted to just double down on that, because I think it's not just what we need to do, but what our companies that we choose to work for, what they can do to support us too. Thank you.
Yep. Excellent point, Ebony. Encouraging, and I see a lot of people in the chat chiming in how their organizations have a mandatory vacation as well. I think as leaders, we have to walk our talk. So we need to also take vacation time, right? Another thing I wrote about in our newsletter is sometimes I hear it as a badge of honor is I have 200 days of vacation to use. And I'm like, how is that a good thing? Like, that means you didn't take time off and you're counting it in this bank for later use. And then the newer folks in the organizations are seeing you as an example of what to do, right? So it's then hard to say, go take vacation when you yourself are not taking vacation. So that, again, representation, we talk about it all the time, representation and walking your talk is important. I'm trying to be mindful of the time. We're at 12:21, so we have 19 minutes left. To the panelists, the next question is about culture. So changing culture is a long-term commitment, and no single individual or entity is responsible for it. Each of you, and that's why you were selected for this panel, are committed to achieving real culture change towards gender, racial, and ethnic inclusivity. Can you share with us what you're doing within your organization and or within this industry? And I'll start with Melinda. You're on mute.
hold on, there we go, sorry. So I work for an airport that is municipally run, and it's most of our positions, most are subject to civil service. And so as far as making real change in our organization for gender, ethnicity, there's non-discriminatory testing, which generally in itself, I would say, is unbiased, right? However, I think that everyone in my position who has civil service testing, especially in an aviation setting, should really look at the job descriptions and make sure that there are not unnecessary and hard to achieve requirements that maybe gender or ethnicity based would have trouble achieving, that just don't really add value to the position. So that's one thing. As far as the industry, I'm sure I could do a shout out and ask where my Yo pros are at, and they're probably all filtered throughout here of the many 114. As far as the industry, the airport industry, I mentor. I think it's really, really important. I think it's very important to be a mentor. Reading this report, I found out I'm also a sponsor, which is a mentor plus. If you're not sure what that is, that's a mentor who really, really helps and promotes the next generation. And so I've made it a mission for me. I work with the young professionals with AAAE to help develop the younger generation. I had a lot of tenacity. I jumped over hurdles and barriers that I didn't maybe even recognize were there, but I just feel like, it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be a challenge. It doesn't need to be that hard for the next generation. We can develop them. They can be bold. They can be confident through achievement. They can already start to network with their own tribe. Then also what I do is I follow up with them. I make sure I check in with them. Are they advancing? Are they having any limits to their advancement? And I make sure that they have an opportunity for achievement. And what I really do is that I enforce that they create their own opportunities. Because sometimes people don't just lay out opportunities in front of you. You have to work hard, and you've got to identify the opportunities to move yourself forward. But I think seeing the industry, I've gone to our events, women, young ladies, and people of all ethnicities, they're showing up. They really are coming up in this next generation. I can say that at least for airports. And it's exciting to see. So that's what I do.
Yes, and I'm a testament. I'm a testify. I don't know which word I'm trying to use, but
I'll take any of them.
Any of them. We're all good. I know Melinda is been a great mentor to many folks in the industry. There's a whiteboard in her office that I could say had a direct impact on me. So she put my name on the path to getting the AAE, and she encouraged me to get my accredited airport executive credentials, and I got that this year. And I know Melinda was a part of my story to getting that, and that whiteboard was a part of that. And I know my name was on it, and I wanted it to be stricken through because she has a list of people that she wants accredited and that she's supporting. So again, appreciate everything that she's doing in AAAE and beyond, and I'm grateful for her mentorship as well. So,
and just to follow up really fast, they say that once you get where you need to be, you got to reach back and pull people up, right? Mm-hmm. And I believe we pull up everybody, but I do keep an eye out for special segments, right? Always keep your eye out and look out for people. So,
yep. Kelly, how about you?
We're running short on time, so I'll be quick, but I have a passion for outreach. I love to speak to classrooms, bring kids out to construction sites and show them what it's like to be an engineer on an airport project. We've worked with colleges, we've worked with elementary, we've worked with middle school, high school, I think all ages. Just get out there, talk to kids, tell them about your job. I like to try to show them that I'm a female, I'm an engineer, I'm in aviation, and, you know, just be a person that they can look at and say, oh, I can do that too. So definitely the outreach.
Awesome. Too bad you're not in the Philly area, because you would be on my list of aviation women that need to come talk to our Transportation U program about aviation and how to be an engineer in aviation.
We have an office there, Avi,
I know.
so if I need
Oh,
to-
I know,
can-
I know,
I
I
can make a
know.
reason to come out.
I'll come back to you on that. Ebony?
Thank you, Avi. I took over as president and CEO of AMAC, which is Airport Minority Advisory Council, for some of you that don't know, about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, in 1 month to the day. And I have been really working tirelessly to ensure that as a trade association that advocates for both minorities and women in contracting and employment in this space, that we are viewed as a thought leader, and we are taking that position. We are really leaning in to ensure that we are a connector of people and opportunities, and that we are providing professional development. So a few of the things that we're doing at AMAC include our work with ACRP. We are the lead of an ACRP project titled 0609, Equitable Workforce Outcomes, the study of women and minority representation at airports. This project is going to help identify and evaluate the current state of women and minorities in this industry, but more importantly, use the information to develop resources and tools to address some of those issues as it relates to recruitment, retention, promotion, wage disparity. And so I look forward to working with WTS and many of you on the phone to collect that information and to ensure that we're putting not just the facts forward, but ways to close the gap. We are also working very closely with our foundation to ensure that we're providing money to women and minorities to continue their education. Last year, we provided about $150,000 in scholarships, and we continue to raise the bar each year on that. Professional development is key to what we do. I see one of our vice chairs of our Aviation Professional Development Committee, Kiva Rodriguez. I want to give her a shout out. Kiva is working tirelessly for many organizations, but including AMAC, and her leadership and the leadership of many of my volunteers, but also my national staff is paying off. We have launched a couple years ago an AMAC Builds Careers program, which has a couple different aspects of the program, from internships to mentorships to senior level programs with fellowships. Last year with our fellowship program, we had airport directors, a couple female airport directors act as mentors. Last but not least, I want to say what we're doing. Actually, there is as it relates to ensuring that we're continuing this conversation, we're looking at professional development, we're building networks. We are working on a women in aviation summit that we will be reaching out to our industry associations to partner on. That will take place in 2024 to continue these conversations, to inspire, to educate, and to promote women. So thank you for the question. I'm looking forward to continuing the great work I'm particularly passionate about with WTS and other industry organizations.
Count us in, Ebony. Happy to support you in ACRP, as well as love to hear that there's a conference coming. I would love to be a part of that. And I'm sure a lot of us on this call would love to be a part of it. So count us in. Dana, over to you.
Thank you, Afi. So I just recently left United Aviate Academy to start up a nonprofit called Breaking Down Barriers for founders Doug and Gwen Parker. We are providing flight training scholarships to minorities starting here in the Dallas, Texas area. Being on the Women in Aviation Advisory Board, I oversaw the training and recruitment section of the report. And when it comes to flight training specifically, it's very expensive, sometimes up towards $100,000 just to get the 7 certificates needed in order to gain the 1,500 hours flight time to progress to the airlines. And when you look at the percentage of males in the industry, we have 7% female ATP, airline transport pilots. But then when you break that down even more, less than 3% are Black airline pilots and less than 0.5% are Black female pilots. So we need to change something. These numbers are just, not progressing. So, there's really great organizations out there, OBAP, Sisters of the Sky, Women in Aviation, and we want to help contribute by providing these flight training scholarships to minorities.
Awesome. Congratulations on your new role. Dallas was my home before Philadelphia, so it's a good city and I know you will like it. I also had boxes in my apartment in Dallas, but for like 5 years, so I didn't unpack all my boxes, but congratulations again, and whatever WTS can do to support breaking down barriers, count us in as well. Good luck to you and in your role. So we have 8 minutes left. There is a final question I have for the panelists, but before I do that, I want to give all of you an opportunity to ask a question. I know there's been lots of fun comments and very great comments, agreeing, sharing your personal aviation journeys. Gwen is offering 7 $5,000 scholarships. Ebony, did you see that? So she said, count us in. So lots of great nuggets in this, but I don't see a question. So if you have a question, please type it in. We have about 7 minutes left and we would love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to raise your hand if you would like to come on camera. I would love for you to come on camera and ask the question. Here's your opportunity to do that. So think about it as you're thinking about it, because I'm not seeing anything yet. I'm going to ask a lightning round question to all of our panelists. So quick answers, because we already know what your answers are, or I do, but the audience does not. But quick answer is, so the board, the Women in Aviation Advisory Board, identified 55 recommendations for the aviation industry and really any industry, right? It's not just aviation, it could be any industry, so that it can be on the leading edge of safety, innovation, and profitability. And each of you pick just one. I know there's you probably like all 55, but just one recommendation that you would like the folks on this call to remember as something to take away from today and put into practice, hopefully starting today or as soon as possible. So lightning round, Dana, you're up first.
Virtual Resource Center, so more people have awareness and more information to get into aviation.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly, virtual resource? Can you talk a little bit more? What can people do today about that, with that?
Yeah, it's gathering the information and having almost like one platform for all things aviation. Again, really great organizations out there already trying to do this. Information changes quickly, and I think that that's one of the barriers to having something like that. But we tend to work in silos, especially government, for-profit, nonprofit. And so it'd be great to have one platform where somebody can go, a guidance counselor, a teacher, a parent, a student, and gain information to access a career path in aviation.
Okay, all right. Kelly? Which recommendation?
Mine is number 46, which is communities of support, which we've talked a lot about. At CNS, we have a women's network. So that's an example of an employee resource group. It started pretty organically. It was conversations between some women that we needed some kind of support. We needed a place we could go to have conversations about specific topics. And I would encourage everybody to either start one or support one and get some people involved. And the thing that we love to do is meet at least once a month and do a podcast. We listen to a podcast and then we talk about it. And we've got different topics. It started as a book study, but we realized we have short amounts of time. So we might do a 20-minute podcast and just discuss it. It might be negotiation. It might be just work-life balance, any of the things we talked about today. And it's just great to connect with people and realize that you're not alone, that you have other people going through the same things.
Yep. Employee resource groups. Absolutely. We did an event on that. And I know a lot of organizations have it. The airport just started YoPros. So, but hopefully there'll be more employee resource groups. Melinda, how about you? And I think by answering your question, I think you're answering Maureen Namukasa's question as well. So what is your recommendation?
All right, I'm gonna hope that I am, because I didn't see your question, but I'll trust your instincts.
Trust me.
So I think it goes without saying, I'm number 42, mentorship programs for sure. I think they talked about a mentoring database that can put anyone but young women in touch with mentors in the industry. It should be available to schools. It should be available to industries. It should be available to workplaces. And I think that would be very important for large organizations. I think this would be really cool for every young person that enters a large company, that they get bonded with an OPRO. So all the YoPros get bonded with an OPRO that becomes their mentor and develops a plan and looks out for their success. I think that can go a long way to helping our future.
Yes. The question Maureen had was, how early can we get younger women into exposing them to aviation industry and the myriad of opportunities and careers available? We're currently conducting STEM outreach, research, and recently focused on middle and high school students. So you answered a little bit with mentoring, field experiences, internships, right? How early can you go? I know, Kelly, in your diagram, you were saying you were showing 0 to 3 was the early.
You can go elementary school. I mean, go into elementary school and there's a great book out there. Oh, I don't have it in front of me, but it's about construction at airports. It's the coolest thing ever. So get that book, bring it to your elementary school and share it with kids.
Yep. That the Women in Aviation Advisory Board is a great start. I think Maureen and others has great recommendations, has case studies, and really great. It's a great read, and I recommend everybody to read that. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to answer with mine, which is sorry, I lost my place. Number 6, which is words matter. Why that's important. All of us have been there where whether it's our names are mispronounced or our gender isn't identified correctly, or we're referenced in a way that doesn't represent us as who we are. Couple of stories for me. When I first joined the airport here 4.5 years ago, I was looking at an RFP and I saw that everything in the RFP about the position that I'm holding was referred to as a male. So he. And so that was what was going to be put out. And it was, for me, something I've been used to in my entire career as an aviation engineer, is seeing a lot of, flagged men, and a lot of things that were about men. And so it's important for us to take a look at the words that we're using, the words that we're writing in our documents, and making sure that it's inclusive. I'll say that the RFPs now do not say she, but they say they will be under the direction of the deputy director, right? So anyone that's looking at it can feel like they belong, and it's not specific to somebody else. So words matter. And we have a minute left, and I want to see if there's anyone that wants to chime in. Ebony, I see your hand is raised.
Yep, I didn't have the opportunity to talk about a very important recommendation, which is recommendation number 23. We did talk about internships and field experiences, but there's a really important point that I want to make sure that people understand. It talks about discovery internships instead of the traditional one. So looking at shorter stints, looking at exposure to various aspects of our industry. One point that was really important talked about helping people as they look at the airport projects, airport development projects, and the role and the culture between the airport authority and the community. Generation Z millennials are passionate about social impact. Having the opportunity to connect to their communities is really, really important in all the work that we do. And so as you create these opportunities, find ways to tap into what is important to them, and choosing employers, and certainly connecting it to their community and social impact is critical. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Ebony. And I know we're 1 minute over, so I just want to thank Melinda, Kelly, Dana, and Ebony. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. We tried it twice, and I think the second time was a charm, right? And we hope this today has inspired those that are on the call for reading the report, and then for doing something, maybe something you heard today from our panelists, or something you will read on this report, something to take away and to put into action, because There are barriers in the workplace, as a lot of you have acknowledged in the chat already. And events like this, conversations like this, you don't need to have a WTS panel. You could go with a group of women in your organization and say, let's have a chat about this report. Get men involved in that discussion as well. But conversations like this are important to get that walking your talk. And so again, I want to thank the entire WTS team for helping me to put this together. It's our final event of the year, and I'm really proud to close out the year with an event like this, which is about breaking barriers for women in aviation, which is what WTS is about, and a lot of the other organizations that are represented here as well. So I want to thank all of you again for participating, and hope to see you at another event soon. So thank you, and please take care.
Bye, thank you.